It was late. Diana wasn't sure how late it was, but it was certainly too late for someone to be calling. She hoped it was Marty's phone, and not hers. Either way, she just covered her face with a pillow and audibly said thank you. When it stopped after the 5th ring, she had just gotten comfortable when the ringing started again. "Darn it," she yelled as she opened her eyes again. "Martin," answered your darn. The word stopped suddenly as she realized her husband wasn't in bed with her. She glanced at the clock, 3:37 a.m., as she picked up her phone off the nightstand, and wondered why her husband wasn't in bed now. He had been there when they went to bed a few hours ago. "Yes. Hello? Hello?" she muttered into the phone. "Is this Diana Miller?" "Yes. Yes, it is. Who's this?" "You are the wife of Martin Miller." "Yes. For goodness sake, yes." "Who is this?" "Mrs. Miller. This is the emergency room at Northtown Medical Center. Your husband was brought in about an hour ago, and we still had your contact information from the incident a year ago. He's been in an accident. Would it be possible for you to come down right away?" "Oh my God. Is he okay?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss his condition over the phone." "Ma'am, could you please come down?" "Yes, of course. I'll be there as soon as I can." She ran upstairs where her daughter was sleeping. Dallas, named after the city in which she was conceived, was attending the local university. But living at home to save money. She'd enjoyed the dorm experience for her freshman year, but as a sophomore, didn't think living near campus would be conducive to her studies. "Del, wake up." Nothing. "Delly, wake up." This time with a little shove on her shoulder. Still nothing. "Dallas, wake up." Dallas sat up straight in bed and tried to force her hazy eyes to focus. The light in the room was on. That had been a short night. "Dallas, your father has been in an accident. He's in the emergency room. You need to get dressed. We need to go." She rolled out of bed and removed her nightshirt, unconcerned about standing undressed in front of her mother. Even at 20 years old, they were no strangers to seeing each other without clothes. Dallas stretched to her full 5'4" height, and her left hand unconsciously scratched the stubbly brown hair above her pelvis. She really needed to shave. For her part, Diana didn't even notice as she was too busy pulling an outfit out of Dallas' drawers. Finally dressed, the two women drove to the hospital as quickly as they felt safe. Dallas began questioning her mother about what had happened. But Diana had no more information than she had already provided. It seemed like an eternity before they arrived. But it was only about 10 minutes, given the lack of traffic at this time of night. There was a space near the entrance, and Diana swung the car in at a poor angle, but didn't care at all as they leaped from the vehicle and headed inside. They were shown to Martin's room in the ER and were shocked at his condition. He was well bandaged and clearly unconscious. They were given forms to fill out. "Your grief doesn't exempt you from paperwork." Dallas moved her chair so she could be close to her father. They were there for about an hour before a man and a woman in police uniforms entered. "Good evening, ma'am. I'm Officer Gail Stanton, and this is my partner, Robert Hansen. We were first on the scene of your husband's accident. Any word on how he's doing?" "No one has said anything to us," Officer Diana answered. "Oh, this is my daughter, Dallas. We need to ask you a few questions. I know the timing is bad, but it's best to do it as soon as possible." "Of course. Do you know what your husband was doing at this time of night?" "That's the funny thing. He was home, and we went to bed together at around 10 p.m. I didn't even know he wasn't there until the hospital called, ma'am," Officer Stanton said to Dallas. "Can you confirm that?" "Actually, I can. We had been watching a movie on TV that ended at 10, and then we all went to bed. I saw Dad go into the bedroom with Mom." "What movie?" The officer asked. "Something with Keanu Reeves. Some action movie." Dad picked it. It was his turn. "Were you folks having any particular issues? Financial problems, maybe, or marital?" "Nothing that all married couples don't face. No particular problems." "No. I just don't understand why he was out without me knowing." "Are the people in the other car hurt?" "Well, that's the thing. Mrs. Miller. This was a one-car accident. And according to both witnesses, your husband's vehicle was driving normally, and then rather suddenly accelerated directly into the large oak tree that sits at the corner of highways 121 and 288. There were no skid marks and no one recalls seeing brake lights. Diana and Dallas looked at the officers as the realization of what they were suggesting became clear. Are you implying that my husband did this on purpose? That he tried to kill himself? We still have to examine the vehicle for possible mechanical failure. And of course, we'll need to speak with your husband when he wakes up. But that is certainly one possibility we are considering. Yes. Are you sure there were no problems you can think of? Officers, I love my husband very much. And we have a wonderful marriage. No, there are no problems that I can think of. I'm sure this was just a matter of him losing control or dozing off. It was very late. I'm sure there is a reasonable. Diana burst into tears and was unable to complete her sentence. Officer Stanton laid one of her cards on a table, asking them to call if they thought of anything else, then made their way out of the hospital. Dallas closed the door to Martin's room for privacy. You didn't tell them? No, Dallas, I didn't, answered her mom as her tears subsided. It's none of their business and had nothing to do with this. Your father was fine with it. If it did, he'll say something when they talk to him. We'll cross that bridge then. The next few days passed slowly for everyone. Martin remained unconscious and had been admitted to the hospital, and Diana and Dallas spent as much time there as they could. They were often there together, but made sure he was never alone. Fortunately, Diana knew Martin's boss and called him to let him know what happened and that he would be missing work. She carefully avoided saying anything that would cause anyone to think this might have been an attempt on his own life. The accident had taken place on Saturday night, Sunday morning, and Martin eventually started to show signs of waking on Wednesday morning. By that afternoon, his eyes were open, though with all the medical equipment attached to him, he couldn't do much more than look around. Diana was there and noticed coming to his bedside to reassure him that everything was going to be okay. Seconds later, a nurse came into the room hurriedly, something on the monitors alerting her that her patient was awake. Diana returned to her seat to allow the nurse to do her work. Soon, more medical personnel came into the room to check on Martin. Diana took the opportunity to step outside to call Dallas, to let her know her father had woken up. Dallas did not answer, so she left a voicemail. Soon, much of the medical paraphernalia was removed. Martin's left arm had been broken, but he was right-handed and did not expect it to hinder him too much. His throat was raw from the tube, so he was given a whiteboard so he could communicate. The nurse read the message and asked him if he was certain. Martin nodded his head. The nurse quickly went into the hallway while tests continued. Mrs. Miller, I must inform you that your husband has asked that you not be allowed back into his room. Your daughter either. What? He's my husband. I have a right to be in there with him. I'm sorry, Mrs. Miller, but the patient's wishes come first. Let me just talk to him. We'll straighten this out. Diana tried to get past the nurse, but never got close. So she resorted to shouting. Martin, Martin, please talk to me. What's going on? Martin, Martin? Mrs. Miller, please stop shouting. You're disturbing our other patients. Now, you can wait outside the room if you want, but if we catch you trying to enter the room or causing a ruckus, we'll have you escorted out of the building. Am I clear? Yes, you're clear. Diana responded with little choice but to do otherwise. Dallas finally made it to the hospital. 45 minutes later, she found her mother sitting in a chair outside the room. Mom, why are you out here? Your father has banned us from the room. Both of us. I mean, I can see why he'd banned you, but why me? What does that mean? And why did it take you so long to get here? I had just woken up when Bradley stopped by to see how I was doing. You were with your boyfriend instead of being here for your father. Sorry, ma'am, but he was still unconscious when I left, replied Dallas, her tone suggesting she felt no remorse. This has been very stressful, and I needed to relax. It worked quite well. For what it's worth, when you can, you should call. No, Dallas, I'm not going to do that. And let's not talk about that right now. It's disrespectful. The irony made Dallas chuckle. There was a knock on the door, followed by the entry of a tall, very attractive brunette. She was dressed professionally, but not like a doctor, though her badge gave her away as a staff member. Good morning, Mr. Miller. I'm Dr. Lassiter, one of the hospital's mental health specialists. How are you feeling? As well as can be expected, I suppose. It had been 9 days since the accident. He had regained the ability to talk. The whiteboard. A thing of the past. He'd asked about when he might be released and could never get a straight answer. Until now, the hospital has asked me to spend some time speaking with you. Would that be all right? Do I have a choice? Not if you want to go home any time soon. I do have to clear you to be released, the shrink replied, a bemused smile on her face. Then let's get this going. Dr. Lassiter pulled one of the chair over to the bedside and sat crossing her long legs. She took a few minutes to review the file she was carrying. Okay, so you were brought in a little over a week ago, following an accident that involved you and a large tree. I also see that you've banned your wife and daughter from visiting, and I suspect those things are somehow related. Got it. In one, Martin replied, she'd been cheating on me. Unfortunately, not a rare occurrence these days, though it rarely leads to this kind of reaction. Is there more to it? Martin went silent for several minutes. He didn't really want to talk about this, especially with a pretty female doctor. He wondered if they had a guy, a really old guy he could talk to. Dr. Lassiter waited patiently. This was not the first time she'd had to wait for someone to get themselves to start talking. Her patience was rewarded. I was suffering from depression, I guess. Nothing that was diagnosed or anything. I was just, well, like I said, depressed about anything in particular, or just in general. I couldn't. I haven't been able to get an erection since. In a little over a year since the previous accident. Right. Of course, she knew she probably had his whole medical history in her hands. She just wanted to make him say it right. It wasn't even a bad accident. I was in the back seat, my boss in the passenger seat and his boss driving. We got hit from behind. There were no airbags or even very much damage, but I hadn't been prepared for it. I got some whiplash and hit my head on the seat in front of me. I assume that's what did it. The report says you had a mild concussion and the whiplash. The doctor interjected. My doctors couldn't explain it. None of the drugs worked even a little bit. They ran a bunch of tests, some more than once, and the best explanation I got was that something had happened and part of my brain was damaged. So you were unable to perform intimately, which led to your wife eventually becoming dissatisfied with your marital relations, which in turn led to her seeking companionship elsewhere. This ultimately affected you deeply and led to the events of that evening. Is that about right? In a nutshell, yes. And how long was it before your wife took that step? 7 or 8 months, I guess. We tried addressing the issue through conversation and purchased some devices for simulation. You know, the intimacy. I understand how it works, Mr. Miller. I've been intimate before. Of course. Sorry. I'm just a little uncomfortable. Anyway, that was okay at first, but we were still hoping my ability would come back. We talk about staying in bed all weekend. Really? Have a good time. That never happened. Of course. Eventually it went on so long that she decided to get her needs taken care of elsewhere. Did she discuss this with you beforehand? No. I found out about it when I came home from work early. A tired cliche, I know. And not only was she home with her lover, but my daughter and her boyfriend were at it too. They were doing it as a group, Dr. Lassiter asked, the shock evident in her voice. No, thank God. Diana and Bill were in the bedroom in Dallas and Brad were in the living room. That's how I found out that my wife was cheating on me and my daughter knew about it and apparently approved. Which explains why your daughter was banned as well. Yes. Oh, and if I didn't mention this before, Bill is Brad's father. We knew him casually before as our daughter's boyfriend's father. I found out later that it was Dallas that suggested Bill to her mother. That's another strike. Did you confront them? Not right then. Maybe if Dallas hadn't been there, I would have confronted Diana. But I'd already seen more of my daughter than I wished to. I left and waited until that night. How did that go? Not what I expected. She was sorry, I found out, but made it clear that if I was unable to take care of her, she would have it done by someone else. And she preferred a regular partner, as she put it, to having to find someone new every time. Bill was unattached and had similar needs, so he was her choice. What did you do? What could I do? She was right about my inability to handle matters. It wasn't her fault that I couldn't fulfill my role. So she took the necessary actions. What if, hypothetically, she had asked you beforehand? Would you have agreed? You know, I've thought about that a lot. And part of me wanted to say I would have been agreeable because I loved her and wanted her to be happy. But I don't think I would have been okay with it. We made vows. We made promises, and one of those was in sickness or health. I wouldn't have done it to her, so I couldn't be okay with her doing it to me. Obviously, she continued seeing him clearly once I became aware of the situation. She became less cautious. I can't determine if the frequency increased as I was unaware of their previous encounters, but whereas previously, such activities were confined to daytime hours while I was at work, now there were weekend errands that evidently included time with Bill. That must have been difficult. Difficult doesn't even begin to describe it. But again, I didn't think there was anything I could do. She deserved an intimate relationship, and I couldn't provide it. But the whole situation was devastating to me. Tell me about the night of the accident. We'd watched a movie on TV as a family. We still had those nights, those moments. I kept my pain. The emotional pain that is to myself. I guess that was a mistake, but I didn't want to burden Diana or Dallas. They kissed and hugged goodnight, while I got a good night from Dallas as she walked in the other direction. I think that was the moment I realized she had totally lost respect for me as a father and as a man. I could hardly blame her since I didn't respect myself either. I got ready for bed as normal. Diana did the same. Everything was the same as it always was. Every night. The same thing. I waited for Diana to fall asleep, then got dressed and grabbed my wallet and keys. I went upstairs and peeked into Dallas's room. She was asleep too. I blew her a kiss and said goodbye. I went and got into my car. I knew it had airbags, but I thought if I hit hard enough, it wouldn't matter. I didn't have a specific plan, but just drove around. I was aware of the big oak tree, but it wasn't my immediate destination. I drove by it the first time and realized there were no barriers, and there was a pretty straight approach available. I drove around again and went straight for it. They sat in silence for a few minutes, both allowing the tale to be processed in their brains. Finally, the doctor spoke. "Mr. Miller, I want to thank you being so open and honest with me today. That's something of a rarity. I'm going to let you get some rest and take some time to process what you've told me. Would it be all right if I came back tomorrow? I'm not going anywhere," he quipped. They shook hands, and Dr. Lassiter left the room. Martin picked up his cell phone, which he'd left at home that night, and which Diana had brought to him before he banned her, and answered a few texts, and emails included in that was giving his boss an update. Then he closed his eyes and tried to get some sleep. Back home, Diana was trying to keep it together. She had been under the impression that Marty was fine with her time with Bill, that he gave it to her as a gift, because he loved her so much. Even when she first heard about the incident, she no longer believed it was an accident. She was sure it had nothing to do with that. But now she wasn't so sure. She suspected the police had spoken to her husband, but hoped he hadn't mentioned her relationship with Bill. The police hadn't contacted her again. But since it wasn't technically illegal to have an affair, maybe they just recorded it as a suicide attempt and left it at that. Case closed. Still, he had never actually objected, had he? If he had, she couldn't remember it. And besides, she was not going to live her life without intimacy just because someone had caused a car accident involving her husband's boss. That was not what she signed up for, and she certainly wasn't going to agree to it now. Once Marty came home, she would make a point to be more considerate of his feelings, more discreet about her moments with Bill. But she was not going to abstain. The next morning, Dr. Lassiter stopped by as promised. She followed the same process, getting one of the nondescript, sturdy chairs that each room had two of, and took a seat. Marty watched in amusement, appreciating the doctor's appearance. However, he remained reserved. "How are you this morning, Mr. Miller?" "Not much change from yesterday, Doc." "Ready to go home? But I guess that's up to you." "Well, partially, but there is a 72-hour hold on you as required by state law. That didn't technically start until you, and I started our conversation yesterday. So 2 more days at least." "That's fine, Doc. At least the food here isn't half bad." "It's all bad." They quipped together, sharing a hearty laugh. "An oldie but goodie," noted Dr. Lassiter. "But I'm glad to see you making jokes." "Me too. It's been a while. And by a while I mean months since I felt like myself. I used to be quite the jokester to the point of getting on Dallas's nerves. Sometimes. Have we had any more bad thoughts gone down? Any more dark alleys in our mind?" "You know, Doc, I haven't. I spent a year being fairly depressed in the last few months, being really depressed. I don't feel that anymore. It's been replaced by anger, by frustration, by disappointment with Diana and Dallas. Certainly more Diana, but mostly with myself. For not standing up for myself, for making it clear to my wife that what she was doing was not acceptable." "Do you intend to take that stand now?" "Absolutely. Though I admit to being tempted to just go for divorce, I have to accept some of the blame for letting her walk over me. But if she's willing to stop seeing Bill, then I'm willing to see a counselor and try to rebuild our marriage. I can appreciate your determination, Mr. Miller. I rarely see this kind of turnaround so quickly. I had lots of time to think about while I was lying here before you ever came in. I appreciate you giving me the chance to voice it, to tell it to someone. It allowed me to focus my thoughts." "Excellent, Mr. Miller. Just excellent. In that case, I'm going to cut things short today. I have a few more patients than yesterday, so I can use the time. I will stop by tomorrow for one last chat. But I see no reason you won't be able to leave on schedule. I look forward to it, Doc." Diana and Dallas were there to pick him up when he was released. If he was going to try to rebuild things, he needed to start by behaving as if things were going to be rebuilt. There was still healing to be done. The airbags had been remarkably effective, far more so than Marty had anticipated. The worst of it was the concussion he got that required him to spend a lot of time resting and relaxing in the dark. The television was left off, and some gentle music played in the background. His wife and his daughter fawned over him. All was well for a little over a week until Diana announced she needed to do some shopping. "No," Marty calmly said. "What?" Diana answered, bewildered. "Marty, there are things we need, including some of your therapy creams. Make a list for Dallas. She can go. Why are you dragging me into this, Dad? Besides, I have plans to see Bradley. Then you'll have an incentive to finish the shopping quickly, won't you? Diana, make a list. This is ridiculous, Martin. You can't just come home and depend the way we do things. Dallas has plans, and I'm going to the store, and that's final." "Do you think I'm stupid, Diana?" "Stupid? No, Marty. Of course not. Why would you ask such a thing? Do you think I don't realize that these shopping trips are excuses to go see Bill? I have never failed to come home with groceries, Martin. Not once. Yes, and it's made excellent cover, but you're gone way too long. And not only that, but I can see it on you in your eyes when you won't look at me in your clothes, when they don't look quite right in your makeup. That's always just a little messed up. At least part of the time is spent with Bill. and that's not happening anymore. The shock in Diana's eyes was obvious, and Dallas suddenly felt a little more respect for her father. "Marty, please. We've been over this. Now I will do my best to take more care. It's obvious that I became a little too relaxed about my encounters, but I am certainly not giving him up. I'm entitled to a personal life, and I mean to have one." So our vows meant nothing. Forsaking all others in sickness and in health. Well, this is the sickness part, and you're not forsaking others. But you'll do so starting now. You'll stop seeing Bill, and we will see a counselor to put our marriage back together. Or you won't. And we won't. And I'll call the divorce attorney on Monday. You'll do no such thing. Martin Miller, don't you dare make threats to me. If I could be intimate with you, and only you, then I would. But I can't. And it's not my fault I didn't cause the accident. I wasn't even there. Suddenly, for nothing, I had anything to do with my intimate life is gone. And I'm just supposed to accept it. Not going to happen. So I am going shopping, and I am going to see Bill, and I'm going to get my needs taken care of. If you want to talk about this some more tonight, then we can do that. But don't you dare think you can dictate to me what I can and can't do without waiting for another word from her husband. Diana walked out her front door, closing it with a window-rattling slam. The silence was deafening. Father and daughter looked at each other. And then Marty went into his bedroom for the first time in her life. Dallas Miller worried about the future of her family, of her parents' marriage. Dad had never really stood up to Mom. But then there was never anything this serious that came up between them. But figuring it was between them, and there was nothing she could do, she fixed herself up and went to meet Bradley. Diana lay on her back, her legs spread wide, immersed in the sensation of the man above her, moving with intensity. Although she suspected Bill had some medicinal help, she found their intimacy superior to her experiences with Marty before the accident. Part of her hoped that Marty would never regain his former vigor because she doubted her willingness to relinquish what she had with Bill. Bill was aggressive. Bill was strong. He didn't ensure his actions were consensual. He simply proceeded to emphasize this. At that moment, Bill turned her onto her stomach, lifted her hips, and began to be intimate with her in a dominant manner. Marty, on the other hand, was always so gentle, so considerate. So Marty, as Diana was engaged in an intimate encounter in another part of the house, her daughter was warding off the overly eager advances of her boyfriend, Bradley. Although she was lying there without her shirt and caressing him, she had ceased her previous activity and was pushing away his hands as he attempted to touch her and reach into her jeans. "Darn it, Dell. What's the matter?" Bradley finally asked in frustration. "Sorry, Bradley. I'm just worried about my folks, and I can't stay in the mood." She stood up and redressed while Bradley remained motionless, seemingly in disbelief that she was not going to continue their intimate encounter. He attempted to recover. "Come on, let's undress and enjoy ourselves. It will help you forget your troubles." "Geez, Bradley, don't you ever think of anything else?" "Darn. We don't do anything anymore. But be intimate. How about taking me on a date to distract me? How about bowling or dinner or mini-golf or anything besides being in your room without clothes?" "I happen to enjoy being unclothed and intimate," Bradley retorted. "It's enjoyable, and it feels good. And I don't like bowling or mini-golf. So why on earth would I take you there?" The light finally went on in Dallas' head. "You're right. You wouldn't. And you don't need to worry about it anymore. I'm going home, and we're through. Find someone else to do nothing with." Dallas walked out of Bradley's bedroom for the last time, ignoring his pleas of Doll. Come on. Bradley was a good-looking guy, but she suddenly realized he was just an older teenager. He had no ambition and no desire to grow their relationship. He was just trying to finish college so he could take a job with his dad's company, and she doubted he'd do any more there than draw a paycheck and take up space. Diana was reaching her peak of pleasure when the front door slammed, causing her to lose intensity slightly. "Kid, how many times do I have to tell him not to slam the door?" Bill uttered in annoyance. Diana climbed next to Bill, and they cuddled up close as she relaxed. Diana knew she didn't love Bill, or even like him all that much, and Bradley was a lazy slob. But Bill was passionate, and if Bradley inherited even a hint of that, then she understood the appeal the young man had for Dallas. It was getting dusky outside as Dallas walked back into the family home. She found her dad relaxing in his bedroom. There was a faint glow, which she realized was coming from the bathroom, where the light was on, and the door was cracked. She realized her dad wanted a little light, but none of the fixtures in the room would go that low. "Dad," he had his back to her and didn't turn over. But he did answer. "Dallas, I'm sorry." That caught his attention. So he carefully sat up in bed and turned to find a gently weeping daughter in the doorway. "Sorry." For what? He had ceased using the affectionate nicknames for her when he discovered she had assisted her mother in finding a romantic partner. Now, even as she cried, he was reluctant to use them, suspecting it might be a trap. Dallas walked closer until she was right at the foot of the bed. "I'm sorry for what I did. I was just trying to help Mom, you know. She was so upset at what you were going through, and that you couldn't." Their eyes met just briefly. "Well, you know what? You couldn't." And Bradley's dad had been experiencing the same emotions since Mrs. Coyle passed away. Bradley says his dad is always talking about how much he misses her, especially the closeness. "I thought they could, you know, comfort each other. I'm sorry to say I never considered how it would impact you." Is that why you acted as you did that night?" Marty was surprised by this sudden outpouring from his daughter. This might still be a trick, but he had to take her confession at face value. If he got fooled, hurt, tricked again, then so be it. "Mostly, I think I was pretty depressed anyway, just because I couldn't." "Well, you know what? I couldn't." Father and daughter caught each other's eyes again, this time sharing a brief smile. "But that's over now, Daly. I'm not going to do that again." "I hope not. I still need you. Are you going to divorce Mom?" "I haven't made any final decision, sweetheart, but I don't see any other result. If she won't stop seeing Bill. But keep that to yourself. She has to change because she wants to, not because she has to." "Okay, Dad, I'm going to head upstairs. Oh, I broke up with Bradley tonight." Marty tried to keep the smile off his face. He had never particularly liked the boy, but it surprised him because she seemed rather infatuated with him, or had once upon a time. "Why?" asked Marty, curious at this turn of events. "Because Dallas started, then paused to consider. Because my daddy once told me that he wasn't good enough for me. And I finally realized he was right. I finally realized my daddy was right about a lot of things." A smile came to Marty's lips as he realized his little girl had grown up a lot today. Dallas walked over to her father and gave him a hug, and realized it was the first hug they had shared in a very long time. Finally, they pulled away, gave each other a smile. Then Marty watched Dallas silently leave the room and go upstairs. No sooner had Marty heard his daughter's bedroom door close than he heard the chirp of Diana remotely locking her car. The good feelings that had just filled him with joy were gone in an instant. He laid back down and closed his eyes. Moments later, Diana entered the bedroom. She had showered at Bill's, and Marty supposed it was better for her to return fresh, rather than carrying the scent of their recent intimacy. Though either way would have clearly indicated what Diana had been doing. "Can you help with the groceries, please? There's actually groceries," Marty quipped as he sat up. "Yes, Marty, I told you I was getting groceries. And I did." Marty hauled the bags in from the car and emptied them onto the counter. He noticed there were no refrigerated or frozen items. It was all to stock up the pantry. He also found the receipt, and the time stamp showed she had checked out of the grocery store nearly 2 hours ago. Shopping first, then off to see Bill that appeared. Even though Marty knew it was going to happen, the evidence before him still hurt the items put away. Marty headed into the bedroom without another word to lie down. He considered whether it was even worthwhile to raise the subject again. There really was no point. Diana had made it clear what she intended to do. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.